Hi, everyone. Welcome to Thinking Green. I'm Rana, and I'm joined today by Stephanie Carrow, Ben Wesley, and Phil Brewer. And we're going to talk about the Middle East, in particular, what's happening in Palestine. So, welcome, all three of you. And the reason Phil and Stephanie and Ben are here is that they've been participating in weekly vigils in Bridgeport and I think in New Haven as well for a long time and have been involved with this for a long time. So I think I'll start out, and I don't care what order exactly, but ask each of you how you got involved with devoting so much of your time and energy to what's happening in Gaza and expanding, to all of Palestine.
Well,
So
I'll be happy to start. Um, and I'll preface it by saying I retired 3 years ago, and so I have no excuse to not be involved. Whereas Stephanie and Ben work full time and they do this on top of it. So if there's any applause, that's who deserves it. I've been a member of Jewish Voice for Peace for about 8 years after a very brief stint with J Street until I found out they were against the boycott movement. And I thought, well, that's weird. And so I joined JVP because not being Jewish, once you're pro-Palestine, then you're automatically an anti-Semite. And I thought by joining a Jewish organization, it would avoid that. As it turns out, the Jews of JVP are also considered anti-Semites. So we're we're all in the same boat. After the October events, there was a demonstration in front of Yale New Haven Hospital by a group called Healthcare Workers for Palestine. And it was well attended, but it was just a one-time thing. And about a year later, I met, actually, I hosted a Palestinian professor, former professor at Yale, who's now back in Bethlehem. And we after I hosted him, we continued corresponding, and a year in, October of 24, of 25, I mean, he was almost despondent. Three of his closest friends had been killed in Gaza, and he said, just do whatever you can. And it made me think back to that demonstration. And I thought, well, we need to just start doing that every week. So we did. So on Tuesdays at noon on the corner of York and Cedar Street, and on Monday at noon in front of the Bridgeport train station, we do a vigil. And the one at Yale, and I make a newsletter each time with new news items and so forth. And we just had our 69th consecutive week of vigil. We had no idea it would last this long when we started it, but it did. And so more recently, Stephanie and Wes, I, Ben, you'll excuse me, but for some reason, Wesley sticks in my mind more than Ben. But but we've started doing the same thing at Bridgeport, and we pass out pamphlets. Um, we want in both cases for there to be as few people as possible who can say, "Well, I didn't know. I had no idea." And so that's what we do.
hey, who wants to go next?
I'll go next. Can you hear me? I just put in my.
Yes.
So yeah. Uh, so I come from a pretty political family. My father was a political dissident in Panama during the '60s. And at that time, the United States was a colonial power in the Panama Canal, and he was, as a teenager, he was fighting to get the canal back into to become part of sovereign Panama. As you know, it was at that time was a colonial protectorate. So he had to flee when the Americans basically were going after the dissidents, trying to rabble rouse at that time. So my father has always inculcated the need for to fight colonialism, for countries to be sovereign, and so that's generally my outlook on all these peace movements, whether it's Gaza or Ukraine, or China and Taiwan. I try to see the need to find peaceful peaceful intervention, and also the need for sovereignty. So that's my outlook in terms of uh, my general outlook in terms of the world. Um, and I see an overwhelming need to tame American colonialism throughout the world. Uh, the For me, it looks like the mask of the empire is definitely off. The CIA is, and um, other areas that the national intelligence services use. They basically say when they're involved in Iran, or when they're involved in Palestine, or when they're involved in coups in Venezuela, they don't even bother to hide it anymore. They just say that they're involved. So I'm very wary of so that's my viewpoint. Is anytime the CIA is usually involved in something, I try to give it a very uh, insightful glance, and see what we can do to help look for peace. Um, and I know that can be complicated, but generally, when the CIA is on one side, I think we should probably be on the other. That's generally my rule. So that being said, Phil's work in New Haven, working to end the genocide in um, in Gaza by bringing a spotlight to the healthcare workers, was a really eye opening for me. I got to join him a few times there in New Haven, and as a result, I definitely wanted to see what we could do on a statewide basis, and that's how I ended up um, um, taking on the challenge of running for Congress in 2024, to try to bring those issues of peace through the fourth district of Connecticut, which includes Stanford, Bridgeport, and Norwalk, where I live. And what I saw, and I think Stephanie can probably speak to that as well, is that there is a whether it's right, left, center, there is a goal for peace. They want peace. They want their tax dollars to be used here. That there's a firmament for people who want the United States to worry about its own problems, and we can see that that's brimming, I think, right now. So um, bringing those issues to Bridgeport specifically, which is where I've been involved with Stephanie and Phil, it's definitely eye opening. There's so many issues with Bridgeport. They're having so many deficits all over the place in their city budget. They don't have money. They have a $30 million budget deficit for schooling that they can't pay for. And when we talk about the numbers of what Bridgeport by the population is giving to Gaza, to the Ukraine war, to the national, just for our national defense budget, all those issues could be easily taken care of if we just took a third of that out, or a fourth of that. So it's a really eye-opening experience. It's really great to talk to people on the ground, what they're thinking, and a lot. They're not dumb. People are really smart. They're really insightful, and it's really a joy to talk to them about trying to make changes that will benefit the United States and the world if we can get off this war this war path.
Thank you. Okay, Stephanie.
Yeah, so I've been a peace activist all my most of my life, starting during the Vietnam War era when I was a teenager, and I I got involved with Jewish Voice for Peace. I'm also a social worker, and social work has its roots in social and political activism, which unfortunately the profession has gotten way far away from, but it's still there in my heart. And one of the reasons I became a social worker. And I joined Jewish Voice for Peace in, I guess, late 2023. I am Jewish, and so that looked like a good place to start. I wanted to be, much more heavily involved, especially after the October events, and I knew that that Phil was doing the vigil in New Haven every Tuesday, but I couldn't get up there. I'm down in Fairfield County, and I just couldn't get up there. So, and I just started thinking we need one. When I joined Jewish Voice for Peace, I knew that its Connecticut chapter is basically centered in New Haven. And one of my goals in the beginning was to get more activity down in Fairfield County, because in 2023, I saw absolutely nothing. At least, maybe a lot of, pro-Israel sign, lawn signs and everything, but nothing for what was happening, what was being done to the Palestinians and what was happening in Gaza. So I really wanted to get some more action down here. And so I just thought, well, I asked Phil, could we do something more locally, and asked Ben also, and it just came together that we're doing Bridgeport. And Bridgeport, as Ben said, is the absolutely perfect place to do it, because one of the things that I feel, I think we all feel we need to connect the dots with is that the not only is what we're doing in Gaza and other parts of the world really horrible, and has been horrible for, as long as the U.S. has been an empire, which has been forever. But it's also depleting our treasury at home and taking money away from the services that people need. And I think that sort of thing is felt more in places like Bridgeport, Norwalk, Stamford, Hartford, New Haven, than a lot of other places in Connecticut. And so that's one of the things that, that we focus on also. And one of the brochures that we hand out every Monday in Bridgeport has as its cover, and I think you have that, is Gaza is a local issue, and it is a local issue. One of the things that happened in Bridgeport in late 2023, early 2024, was that there was an attempt, which finally passed, to pass a non-binding resolution for a ceasefire in Gaza, for the city of Bridgeport to pass that. And there was a big fight against it, even though it was a non-binding resolution. There was a big fight against it, and one of the arguments against it was, this has nothing to do with Bridgeport. There's no reason that the city government should get involved in any way, because this has absolutely nothing to do with Bridgeport. And my feeling, and the feeling of many others, is that this has everything to do with Bridgeport, because the money that's being siphoned off from education and housing and food and so on in Bridgeport is going to kill people and kill children in Gaza. So there's a definite direct connection. And I volunteer at a food pantry most Sundays, and Ben has volunteered there as well. And we see the lines getting longer and longer and longer. And it's one of only many, many food pantries in Bridgeport, and still people are in need. So that, for me, as a peace activist and as a social worker, that connection is really, really important. And it's one of, as I say, in addition to just caring about the lives of the people in Gaza and the West Bank and elsewhere in the world, it's also, I care about the lives of the people back home as well.
And I'm in New London, and we are sort of the regional hub for social services, even though we're not a very big city. And, it was a big deal this past year that the school budget was flat funded, and there's a real sense of austerity of where public money should go, and to help the local people who are really in dire straits is often not on the list. And also, for full disclosure, I'm also Jewish, and my background is I lived in Israel from 1969 to 1974, and in fact, I have two kids who were born there. I don't think they've renounced their citizenship at this point, but I think it's just an oversight. They don't have any plans to ever go there. But my younger son was born during the Yom Kippur War, and so in the early days, and I lived on a kibbutz up. I was trying out socialism up near the Lebanese border, and we did. When I went into labor, we did need to have an Army half-track accompany our ambulance down to the hospital in Nahariya, which was the closest one to where we lived. But once I was in the hospital, I was safe. I had, gave birth to this kid and I got good medical care. And then 50 years later, when in 2023, I was so struck, for one thing, it was my son's 50th birthday coming up. And that kind of, just sort of stunned me. But the fact that the first target of the Israelis in Gaza on October 8th was neonatal wards targeting infants and healthcare workers. And I thought, this isn't a war. Like, I was in Israel during a war giving birth in a neonatal ward, and this is something different. So that kind of jerked me into this issue to start with. I'd been pretty critical for years. Jeff Halper was in Connecticut for a tour in around 2003, on behalf of Israeli Committee Against House Demolition. And, that was about clearing, unwanted people off of land that could be developed by, those with big money, those, European or American Jewish people. And that was sort of not quite the start of my disenchantment, but since then I've been, personally boycotting because it's just not right. And when we lived there 50 years earlier, there did seem to be a different path, and it certainly wasn't followed. So I want to talk a little bit about what the conditions are in Gaza, in the rest of Palestine, in the West Bank, in the region, because, the U.S. mainstream media really doesn't give a very good, a very full picture of it. And if you'll indulge me, I'm going to share my screen a little because I have a couple of slides that are from before October 2023 about what the realities were. So this is from a long time ago. There's been an apartheid system in Palestine for decades now, and a lot of Americans still don't really know a lot about the West Bank segregated roads. That, if you have the wrong color license plate, you can't drive on the highways, and you can't get into the settlements. So that's been the case for a couple decades. Let's see if I can. Let's see. A lot of land being confiscated to build settlements. And the settlements aren't really settlements, they're cities. This Beitar elite has a population of over 60,000 people. And there are some that are as big as Danbury. So that's what's been going on also. And just with Gaza, this is what Gaza City looked like in 2007. And this is what it looked like a year later. And that's the safe zone. So we're talking about really a devastating I don't know, social separation, political separation, but also ecological damage that's happened. And it didn't just start in October of 2023. So that said, I guess I'd like to have a conversation about what's going on. I know, Phil, the healthcare workers, I was really pretty impressed, were among the first group of people that I knew in Connecticut who really understood what was going on to start with. And I suspect it was the attack on the hospitals. But what are your thoughts about what's happening now and what the conditions are? I'm sure they're being underreported by our U.S. mainstream news.
I think Phil can probably best answer that.
So that's a lot of ground to cover. But first of all, the first point I think is important to get across is what's happening in Gaza is a genocide. And I'll repeat that. What's happening in Gaza is genocide. And this is one of my big issues. In fact, I've just written a piece that I'm submitting to Roll Call. And, well, let me go back a second. Doctors Against Genocide. So I'm in three groups. Obviously JVP, but also Doctors Against Genocide and Healthcare Workers for Palestine. Doctors Against Genocide. Every month we go to Washington and we have appointments on the Hill with senatorial and House offices. In the House, about a third of the time, we actually speak with the representative, and the rest of the time we speak with their staffers, and it's usually somebody who is concentrated on foreign affairs and sometimes military affairs. Genocide is something that was defined by Raphael Lemke, who was a Polish Jewish lawyer who, after he escaped, came to the U.S. And literally haunted the halls of the newly formed United Nations to get a law passed or a treaty, international treaty against genocide. And he succeeded. He coined the term genocide. The reason I'm insisting on this is that people come up to us and say, well, it's not a genocide. They haven't killed everybody. And I invite anybody who sees this program right now, just Google genocide convention. That will get you directly to the UN website that lays out article by article, term by term, what it says. And it's very simple. And if you read it and then you look at what Israel has done, there's no debate about whether it's genocide or not. So what's happening is Israel is a colonial state that has had as its goal from the very beginning to remove all of the indigenous population from Palestine and to have a country just for Jews, just for Zionist Jews. And they have never stopped in that goal. And what they're doing right now, they see as this is the final step. We're finally going to succeed. And so they have destroyed Gazan society. What are the pillars of society? Education, shelter, medical care, food and water, and culture. And so they have destroyed systematically every one of those pillars of society. And as a physician, of course, I'm most concerned with healthcare. There are 12 major hospitals in Gaza. There were 12 major hospitals in Gaza. They've all been destroyed. There are 2 that are functioning on a very basic level, but basically the entire healthcare system in Gaza has been destroyed. Doctors Without Borders, or MSF, provides about 20% of the beds that are still existing in Gaza. They've been ordered to pack up and leave as of March 1st. They were ordered this 2 months ago with a deadline of March 1st to be completely gone. So already, with fewer hospital beds, they're going to lose another 20% of what's left as all of those people leave. There are no antibiotics. Right now, there is an outbreak of bacterial meningitis that is killing children. There's no diagnostic possibilities because all of the labs have been destroyed. And so when they do make a clinical diagnosis, it doesn't really matter because they don't have antibiotics to treat it with. In this country, pediatric bacterial meningitis has a mortality rate of 5 to 15%. This is a lethal disease. In Palestine, it's well over 50%, and of those who survive, they generally have very severe neurologic sequelae. There is a rise in hepatitis A because people are literally sloshing around in raw sewage when they leave their tents. There's no bandages because they're dual use. Children have not had school going on 3 years now. Guess what also is on the list of things that you're not allowed to bring into Gaza because they have dual use? Paper and pencils. Children in Gaza can't even sit at home and draw and write something with paper and pencil because they're not allowed in. So they are systematically destroying the Palestinian culture in Gaza. The Palestinian culture in the West Bank is being rapidly expelled. They've just demolished the UNRWA headquarters in Jerusalem. They're destroying houses. They've just passed a new law giving the Israeli army supremacy in areas A and B, which are the two areas that are supposed to be under Palestinian control, according to the Oslo Accords. It's very clear that their goal is to destroy Palestinian society, expel all the Palestinians, and have an Israel that is uniquely Jewish or almost uniquely Jewish. And as we've seen from dictatorships in history, once they achieve that, they're likely to strip the Israeli citizenship from the 20% of the population that is not Jewish and force them to leave. Where does it end? And unfortunately, we do have a media, as you mentioned, Rana, that is woefully inadequate. Israel has murdered 263 journalists. That's more than World War II, Korean War, Vietnam, et cetera, et cetera. And so the facts on the ground are not getting out. And we have a Congress that's controlled by AIPAC. I was just in Washington Wednesday meeting with senatorial offices, and I briefed our little group before we went in each time. And the first part of the briefing was how much money the person that we were going to see, or the staffer of the person we were going to see, how much money they had accepted from AIPAC. So one senator, $502,000 he's accepted from AIPAC. The next senator, who we think of as kind of on our side, $200 and some thousand from AIPAC. So I better quit because I could go on easily for a couple hours, and I want to not hog the microphone here. So I'll stop there. I'd rather answer specific questions. Don't ask me an open-ended question. You'll get an hour-long rant. So sorry.
I'll say something to that.
Ben.
Hey, Rana. I just wanted to speak to just tag on to what Phil said in terms of the journalism. I'm not Palestinian. I'm not, I'm not from the Middle East. I don't know the ins and outs of that area. But that's by design. I mean, we don't know by design, like as Phil alluded to. Um, uh, Stephanie and myself wrote a piece in the, where did we write our piece? In the
Connecticut Examiner.
Connecticut Examiner, about this issue specifically, which was the issue of censorship, in which we cited numerous times in which the U.S. government has basically uh, stifled speech, specifically in regards to Gaza. We talked about the fact that just recently a Israeli billionaire was here, Shlomo Kramer, who said specifically that on Fox News Business, saying that we would need to curtail the First Amendment because that would allow because too much free speech allows for misinformation. So that is the sentiment amongst the elite in Israel, and I guess amongst the elite here in the United States as well. We also cited a specific incident where a U.S. Army veteran posted in Miami about various issues, including in Miami Beach about the Palestinian crisis, about LGBTQ issues, and she was visited by the Miami Beach police because of a Facebook post that she had posted, and they wanted to know specifically why she had posted it and get information for her, and she had immediately uh, uh, let them know that she has that they had no right to do that. Um, Another example of that censorship was my wife and I. She's not a very this is not an issue that's pertinent, super uh, relevant to what she does, and it's not something that's of a high interest to her. I wanted to kind of give her an idea and a little bit of information about it. So we wanted to watch the documentary No Other Land, which had recently won the Academy Award. So this is obviously a famous film, something that it should be easily accessible. We spent hours trying to get a VPN so that because we couldn't watch it in the United States, we had to get a VPN so we could watch it on a British channel. That might have changed in the last few months, but when we wanted to watch it, which was a few weeks after it had won this prestigious award, it was nearly impossible for us to watch it easily in the United States. That's obviously by design. And I'll just say one more thing, in regards, I can't stress enough that this is by design, that we're not allowed to learn about what's going on in Gaza. The FC files that have been recently released make that clear. That the fact that these various groups are working with each other to stifle dissent, to make sure that news media didn't report on issues related to Gaza and Palestine in general. That's obviously clear. And I'll also just reference one thing that I heard from Bassem Youssef, the comedian who he recently was on CNN, and he was talking about, this is just in general, he was talking about the fact that um, he's of Middle Eastern descent, and he was talking about how crazy it is that the Epstein files were released, and it's really these 3 million files are up to us to decipher. If we lived in a government that was just and moral, we would be using our tax dollars for experts in the FBI to discern what's important and to go after the offenders. It really shouldn't be up to us, the taxpayers, or 4 congressmen at a time going into this computer room to check through the files. It should be professionals that we pay to go through these files, find out who the perpetrators are, give them a just trial, and if they've done wrong, put them on, send them to jail. But instead, this insanity is for us to go through these files, and go after every lead, even though this makes absolutely no sense. So I thought that was really insightful, and I think that's relevant to the Gaza issue. And just one last point. I mean, as an observer, just in general, if you destroy 96% of the homes of the buildings in a particular spot, you can't expect that of a population of 2 million, 2.5 million, that only 70,000 people are dead. I think that's crazy. But trying to discern exactly how many died, that's where where this murkiness really it works as a detriment, because we can't say we don't know exactly, because we're not able to find out how many people died. They don't allow journalists to get in there. So it's really insidious, the fact that that our media is not holding these people to account.
And that's been another casualty of this whole situation, is that there's now an attack on the home front of our First Amendment rights. And that's all, and that's another reason that this is all connected, that what's happening over there is connected to what's going on over here as well.
Yeah, the First Amendment rights are really a big connection. And I feel as though, in some groups, it's sort of, it's quite intentional. I feel particularly like I have to speak out because someone could call me anti-Semitic, but we did 23andMe like 20 years ago, and I'm like 99.4% Ashkenazi, and my all four grandparents came from Eastern Europe, so I probably lost like second cousins in the Holocaust. To me, nothing makes more sense than like a European Jew being anti-genocide, you think, but that isn't where a lot are. But the whole conflation of, being anti-Zionist with being anti-Semitic just makes no sense. But it's everywhere. It's so hard to fight at such a basic level, and especially for people who are don't have the backstory I have. But it's a tremendous impact here. So yeah, I think I do have the graphic, Ben, that you had sent about Gaza being a local issue, and I'll try to share this. I have to go to here. And it's part because our public money is funding this genocide, more than enabling. It isn't just letting it happen or passively enabling it. We're funding it, and at the same time, our leaders are, having austerity policies at home to where we can't seem to afford basic human needs for the people who live here. I think it's almost, I got involved in politics in New London, kind of as a result of the eminent domain case, in Fort Trumbull 25 years ago. And so I've looked at urban renewal, and it almost all seems like the same thing. Like there are developers who have all this money, but they don't have a place to invest them. So they're going to get rid of the people that they've decided are disposable by some means or other. Sometimes it seems relatively benign. They just say, we'll buy your house for you and from you. But sometimes, it's become very extreme in a place like Gaza, where it's like, well, we're going to kill you and you can't even leave. And I think in your last newsletter, Phil, you mentioned something about the Rafah crossing, and I think an update on that might be helpful, because I think there are a lot of Americans who think, oh, well, they should just leave.
Yeah. Well, there is no ceasefire. After being closed for over 2 years, the Rafah crossing has sort of opened to great fanfare, but in fact, so there are 18,000 people who have been approved to leave Gaza for advanced medical care in other countries. There are supposed to be 200 people a day leaving under those circumstances. In the first 4 days of its reopening, there were five people out of 18,000. So it's no more open than the ceasefire is a ceasefire. Israel's 1,000. So just some little tidbits of figures to leave you with. There are 6,500 tractor trailers parked on the periphery outside the barrier fence around Gaza. Multiply that by 57 feet long per truck. That's a line of 70 miles of trucks, or 110 kilometers of trucks, filled with humanitarian supplies, and they're not allowed in. There are 72,000 confirmed dead. To be confirmed dead, you have to have been killed by trauma, by a bomb or a bullet or a fire or something. You have to have died in the hospital, or your dead body or a bag full of your dead body parts has to have been brought to the hospital. If neither of those conditions apply, you're not in that number of 72,000. Israel and our media has been placing that number in doubt until last week, when finally the Israeli army said, yeah, that's right, it's about 72,000. It also doesn't count at least 3,000 people who have been killed by American thermal bombs, which create intense heat, 3,500 degrees of heat that just vaporizes you. There's nothing left. And so you're not dead because there was nothing to bring to the hospital to prove that you're dead. And there's at least 100,000 or more people who had appendicitis or all sorts of medical conditions that they died from, that they would not have died from were it not for the destruction of the healthcare system. They destroyed every dialysis center. So everybody who was on dialysis 2 years ago, they're dead. They're all dead. So those are just some little numbers to remember, and there's one thing that will stop this, and that's when we quit shipping weapons to Israel. It's the only thing that's going to make a difference. And so that's our focus. That's our focus.
So bringing it back to what can we do about it on different fronts? I think, I want to spend maybe the last 10 minutes talking about that, because I think there are things we can do as individuals. There are things we can do in terms of local advocacy, and then there are things that we need to push our government to doing. And I know you three, I kind of invited you to be on because you're doing a lot of these things. So what can we do?
That is the biggest question, because I think we're all of us trying so many different things on so many different fronts. There are the vigils, there are marches that still take place. We're still, Phil and others are going up, once a month to Capitol Hill to talk to senators and representatives. Many of us are still calling and emailing our members of Congress and making, demands and urging one thing after another. There's certainly boycotting is clearly an extremely important thing that needs to be done, and also divestment, state divestment from all sorts of funds connected with Israel are really important. But I think Ben and Phil can talk to this more, but I think it's like a multi-pronged approach. But one of our goals with the vigil is to educate people as much as possible about even what's going on there, because I think it's fallen out of public view lately. And when we hand out our brochures, we have a lot of information in those brochures as to what individual people can do in the way of boycotting, in the way of calling their representatives in Congress, calling on the state to divest from funds connected to Israel. So those are some of the things. But I think the very first thing is to raise awareness more and more and more. But I'm sure that Ben and Phil have more that they can say about that.
Well, I'll share some info about the vigils because there are a few. So you three have been involved in the ones in Bridgeport, and that's every Monday?
Yes.
Monday at noon at the train station.
And then there are also vigils in New Haven. I talked to the people in Hartford, and they've had to recently, because of the snow, discontinued the Yukon Health Center in Farmington because there's no safe place to stand there because of the snow. So there are, but these are places to both talk to people who are on the same page and make connections, but also be visible to the public. And I think now no one is going to actually be able to read all of this, but but there are so many different things that people can do. I wanted to say something. Someone mentioned MSF, and I had an odd experience recently. I donated some money to MSF through my, I'm old and retired, through my required minimum distribution. And so we sent them a check in late November. And about a week or two ago, we received a letter, basically the acknowledgement letter from MSF. And it had been cut open. Was taped shut. And the letter inside, whoever had cut it open was kind of sloppy because they had actually cut the letter as well. It was in two pieces. And I'm wondering, I got that almost the same within a day or two of when Israel had told them they had to pack up and leave. And I'm just wondering if someone's checking their mail, my mail. Speaking of like First Amendment rights, feeling a little bit sketchy right now, it was very strange. I kept the envelope, I kept the letter, and I don't know. I'll have to see if like more of my donations to questionable places get treated that way. I wouldn't have thought Doctors Without Borders would be that controversial.
Yeah. Well, you saw what happened with Action Palestine or Palestine Action. They won their court case. At least it's on appeal now, but they won their court case, which is amazing. Things to do. So I had an earlier Zoom call with our New Haven Doctors Against Genocide group with the aide in Rosa DeLauro's office, who we are in regular contact with. And again, he said, make those phone calls. Make those phone calls. It's once you get in the habit of doing it, it becomes a habit. And you just say, here's, this is who I am. I'm a constituent, and I'm against the genocide. And if you say nothing more than that, that's already good. And he just emphasized, because I've been following the New York Times, and I think it's been 18 weeks now. I've lost count. That there hasn't been a front page article about Gaza in the New York Times. It's been about 3 months now. It's just fallen off the map, and we just have to keep making noise. We have to make noise. There's another No Kings march scheduled for March. I forget the date. You probably know. I think it's very important for us to show up with our keffiyehs, with our Palestinian flags, because there's resistance among a lot of people against having us represent Palestinians at the No Kings March, and we have to fly our colors and make that part of No Kings. That's
And
very important.
I'm thinking that, there's pretty mainstream opposition to ICE actions in this country. And you know, so I do wonder if the more we can make connections between what's happening there and here, there's definitely been shared policing, tactical coordination,
Yeah.
and shared surveillance systems and maybe
Well,
shared weaponry.
Jewish Voice for Peace did a campaign, and you can look on, if you just go to JVP, you can find this campaign. It's called Deadly Exchange, and it's about this. It's been going on for 20 years. American policemen and women have been going to Israel and seeing firsthand and learning the techniques of how to abuse people, because that's what the Israeli police do to Palestinians on a regular basis. And a lot of these tactics that you see, like kettling, um, they come straight from the suppression of Palestinian rights. So it's
Not,
it's it's the same thing. Sorry.
no, I was just saying, not to mention cold-blooded murder of
Yes.
citizens,
Yes. Yeah. With impunity.
without any qualms whatsoever. Um, but I wanted to mention that I recently saw, just a few days ago, saw a short clip from Miko Peled, who everybody knows, him.
Hmm.
And he was saying that we have to keep Gaza front and center because it really is the central issue around which everything else revolves. And I think that that's really true. It is imperialism writ large. It is totalitarianism writ large. And if we can really focus on that and understand, what that's about, and call a halt to it, stop the bombs, and stop the funding, then other things are going to fall in place. Because what I think Ben was saying earlier, what we're doing in Venezuela, what we're pushing for in Iran, what we're trying now to do to Cuba, all of that is because we can do that in Gaza. And it's just, and even what ICE is doing here, all of that, the stage was set in Gaza. So that's really the heart of the matter.
Well,
And I'll just say, one of my colleagues, Andrew Rice, who's running for Congress in the third district. He just confronted your Congressman Joe Courtney. I don't know if you got a chance to see that,
I haven't
but
seen it yet.
Hakeem Jeffries was in town, or he was campaigning with Joe, with Congressman Courtney, and yeah, he got a twofer. It was really very, very good. He confronted him on both on Gaza and on ICE, and it's a very effective. I'm sure it's going to go viral. He just did it last night. Um, what Phil's doing, visiting your congressman, confronting them, telling them that this is genocide. When they're in DC or when they're in town, that both Stephanie and myself have gone to see Jim Himes when he does events in our district. Just keeping the pressure up and making sure that that's visible.
So, are any of our representatives in Congress really good on this issue?
No.
I was afraid the answer was.
Oh, no, that's not true. That's not true. But there are very few of them. So let's see. I don't have it with me. Of the Wednesday, when we do this Washington thing, we're either in the Senate offices or the House offices, and I'm mostly in the Senate offices. And the junior senator from Delaware, she has said very emphatically she will not vote for any more weapons for Israel. that's pretty good.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. And Mark Kelly, he hasn't gone that far, but he's getting closer and closer. We have definitely seen over the last 4 or 5 months a shift. We all know about there are people now who are very publicly saying, I won't take any more APAC money. Um, APAC has become a dirty word in
Yeah.
Washington. So things are moving, and that's why we have to keep making those phone calls, sending emails if you want to do that. And just, you're going to talk to some staffer and you're going to say, this is who I am. I'm a constituent. It doesn't have to be a long, there are these form things that you can use, but if you just say, I'm against, I'm against the genocide, and I don't think that babies should be dying of hypothermia because they don't have shelter. There's been 12 babies died in the last month from hypothermia, and that's with 40 and 50-degree temperatures. They're not freezing to death. They're malnourished, and in the night their body temperature goes down so low that they die. That's just inexcusable, and we're doing it.
And
So,
as far as Connecticut representatives, though, I don't think we've found any who can.
oh no,
Yeah,
they're awful. They're
yeah.
awful.
And but Ben brought up something before that's important. We've been to town halls with our congressman has held, Jim Himes, and many of us will ask him questions. He has a Q&A after he goes through his whole spiel. There's a
Mm-hmm.
Q&A point, and we do ask him questions, and his response is pretty pat. It hasn't really moved him that much, but I think it's really important for more and more people to go to those town halls when he has them, if you really care, and speaking out and letting him see your face and letting him know that that's how you feel. I think that's a really important thing as well.
They are
Yeah.
supposed to be our representatives. And just, I want people to know that Andrew Rice actually is going to be a guest on my show live on
Good.
March 3rd. So, because it's hard to challenge incumbents in Connecticut. It's really hard.
Or
So,
anywhere.
more power to anyone who's putting in the effort.
But I mean, just bringing that to light, though. I mean, even if they don't win, they make, as Ben did last year, they make it the front and center case, and that's really important.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, thank you, to three of you. I think we've been talking for about an hour. So thank you very much. If you have any, contact info or links that I should be, putting back, a slide in on the end, let me know. And we'll have more on this subject as time goes on. Thanks again to Phil and Stephanie and Ben, and I'll see you next week.